Director of Southeastern Educational. She is a grant writer extraordinaire and a woman with a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge to share with us. She normally travels great distances to give her presentation, and I'm sure is compensated handsomely. And we are just so very, very grateful that she has been willing to come and share this with STEMspark today at no charge to us and our teacher partners. Please give a round of applause.
Okay, so if everyone that has a laptop is able to get on, then I'm going to change screens. Is everybody where they want to be? Okay. It may take me a moment to switch over to this. Jim, do you know what the names of these drives are? I guess there is.
There you are.
A little bit about me. I'm a former classroom teacher, and as a classroom teacher, I used to spend a lot of money out of my own pocket buying things. Anybody done that? Yes. So it's really exciting to share information whereby you might get some of someone else's money to do work in your classroom, and that's why I really am very much pleased to be here to share this information with you. You will go away probably with more questions than you came here, but that's okay because I'm going to give you some places to go look, some resources that you can check out, some websites. I think you've got a handout. I'll show you some of these websites and give you some really good tips about how you can go after other people's money. There is a pot of gold, and sometimes the pot of gold is small at the end of the rainbow. So the pictures that you're going to see were taken by my husband last week. We spent about 9 days in Alaska. He was photographing grizzly bears, and I had some close encounters myself, but he was doing this intentionally. And then we just took some photographs. Yes. And for those of you that are science teachers, which I hope there's a lot of people who are science teachers, you notice the real vibrant colors of that rainbow. We saw that a lot, and the people there, the park rangers, said that's because of the air quality and the purity of the air. We saw double rainbows. We saw colors and rainbows that we don't normally see. So I assure you there is money at the other end of this process, and it takes a little work, but it's not impossible. And unless you ask for it, you won't get it. So you always need to remember that. And then you have to go after it very aggressively, but I'm going to give you some tips about how you can store materials, and then you don't have to go through this grinding process of collecting data and writing narrative. There are places that you can actually store materials in chunks, and then you just have to keep going back and getting the chunks out. So how are you going to go after it? So I've got some cards up around the room. I would like for you to think about the cars. There's a Cadillac there, there's a Dodge Caravan, there's a Jeep Cherokee, there's a Model T. I don't know, that's a Corvette back there. That looks like a Honda. There's a Bug, and there's an Edsel. So here's your challenge. Think about yourself as a proposal development grant of a proposal development process, and about a vehicle for providing resources for improved teaching and learning, which is why you're here. Look around the room at the cars, and you see that they're different. They have a lot of different characteristics. So I'd like for you to stand up, look at the cars, and then go to the type of car where you feel you currently are in this process of going for proposals or grants, and you'll get into a car group, and I'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes to get there, and then we're going to have a conversation in your group. Sure. Everybody clear on the assignment? Go stand by the car that you think best exemplifies how you feel about grant writing.
Sorry. Be careful, be careful, be careful. Sorry.
That's fine. All right. All right, I want you to have just a little conversation about why you are where you are with the other people in your group. And if you're by yourself, I'll talk to you.
We've got too long.
You're really in a really good place. Go ahead and tell me why you're there.
I get a whole lot of coffee just to go down to Walmart and do that.
Okay.
That's just kind of how I feel. I can put a lot of information in there and not really have it sorted right, not really have organized the way it needs to be. We just get used to just go. Does that make sense? Okay.
All right, one person now in your group. I'm glad we didn't have anybody but Edsel. Oh, you are. All right, Edsel person. Since you're the only person to talk to in that group, why did you stand there?
Because I know very little about writing grants,
You know very little, okay?
and I'm from the old school.
You're from the old school. And then we have somebody over here that I missed with the Cadillac.
I want the best.
You want the best. All right, that's good. How about the Beetle?
We decided we're at the Beetle because it's sort of basic transportation, and we feel like we have some basic skills, but we're not where we need to be.
Okay, so it's good transportation, it can get you there. And then this group with the Model T. Okay, come on. Who's gonna tell me about this
I
one?
think we're over here because we know nothing, we're not extinct like the Edsel, but we don't know anything. We've been around a while maybe, and just haven't had enough experience.
Okay, all right. So,
I'm by myself.
you're by yourself too?
Well, I'm exploring, and this is new territory for me, but, I'm willing to go out there and discover.
Okay, all right. So you've got an all-terrain kind of vehicle that, if it gets bumpy, you're in the right vehicle. Now I'd like for you to think about where you are, and I'd like you to move to where you want to be.
I'll go with you. All right. You want to see people.
Okay, think about this one is, this is where you want to be when you deliver the goods, the grant, the proposal, the document, whatever. All right. That's pretty easy. All right, have a conversation. I think I know what the conversation's going to be.
I guess I should move,
To the Fast and Furious caravan.
Well, because it looks like it involves a lot of stuff, so. And so what is our conversation here? Because I already said I want to be.
And you didn't even move. You
I
stayed
didn't
right
move.
there. You want the Cadillac.
I do. Absolutely. But this is a family car, so it
Yes.
would also include takes.
Yes. Were you there?
Yes.
Yes.
She was.
Yes.
But
On data.
Yes.
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 Okay. Group back here in the vet group. You're all in the vet group, right?
Good to see you. Are you still with?
Everybody?
Yes.
We want to get there
Yeah.
fast and look good doing it.
Get there fast and look good doing it.
I was looking for a jet.
You were looking for a jet. I had one with a plane and behind it, yes. But it was behind a 56 Buick, and I figured people would get like, well, which one are you really talking about? How about over here with the Cadillac?
well, we were over here talking. We wanted something that was very selective. I don't want just any old grant. I want something that works and works for the long haul, not just a hit or miss but to really get us there and dependable is what I
Okay,
think is it.
all right. And then we have one person at the Dodge Caravan.
I chose the Dodge Caravan because it looks like it holds a lot of material, money, and also could carry a lot of people that could help.
Okay, so that's all really good choices. You want to get there fast and look good, and you want something that's going to be durable, and you want help. Okay, all right. Thank you. You can sit down.
Trying to get out of y'all's way.
Now, I step in and out of presenting roles from time to time, so think about as a classroom teacher how you might do things like that in your classroom with very, sort of not a lot of resources, and have kids have conversations about whatever topic you like. Plus, it gets them out of their seat if you can deal with that, but it does help sometimes for them to get up and move around. The first grant I received was $50, and I thought I was blind. Let me tell you, it was I was at the center school, where you may know where that was. It's in the old Fifth Avenue school, Fifth Avenue, Old Knoxville High School, and the $50 came from a local women's group grant, but it bought me something that I did not have to buy myself. And at that point in time, I thought, this is really good, because I was not making that much money, and $50 bought me some nice microscope slides that I could work with kids. And otherwise, it was going to have to come from someplace else, mainly probably my pocket. So I got kind of hooked on that. I don't gamble. I do occasionally put a quarter in a slot machine or play blackjack. And if I do, I play red or black. That's your best odds. One bet and get out, because otherwise you lose money. But I realized that writing grants is like a really sophisticated exercise in gambling. And there's ways to put the odds in your favor. So, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the grant process. We're also going to look at some grant URLs, and I have them loaded into this PowerPoint so we can look at them. But you can also, I think they're there where you can just type them in later. We're going to discuss what a grant format looks like. Sometimes you don't have to think about that, but sometimes you do. We're going to share some ideas about writing a grant, and then talk about steps to complete the grant process. There are three really important elements to a good grant, and you have to have all three. Bottom line, you have to have a good idea, you have to have a solid proposal, and it has to be submitted to the right person, because if you submit a grant to an organization or an entity that doesn't fit their mission or doesn't fit their sort of parameters for funding, this won't work. So you always have to have the right funder, and we're going to do a little exercise with that, looking at what does it say, where can you find information about your particular funding person. Now I know you're going to write a STEM grant, and that's great. So you're going to be given guidelines on that, but there's a lot of other money available. I'm going to show you a couple of other places you can go get money. So we're going to look at that. You have to have a good idea. It doesn't have to be the most innovative thing in the world. You have to show your need and have a good idea to actually address your need. That's all you need, and it needs to be solid. I've actually read proposals like for U.S. Department of Ed and for the National Science Foundation, where literally the question was almost like, if you'll give me the money, I will do something good with it. Well, that goes into a pile that's like, I'm not looking at this one anymore. So you always have to have a solid proposal that has a good idea, that addresses a need, and that's sent to the right person. We'll look at that a little bit more in depth. The biggest mistake you can make is if you think that once you get this written that you can submit it. There's a lot of other steps that you have to go through, and we're going to talk about those. Because every year, in every, if I start using jargon and you don't know what that is, just say I don't know what that means. Okay? Every year, RFPs, requests for proposals, are issued and the best proposals are funded all the time. And so you can have lots of different reasons for having your proposal rejected. One would be sloppy writing. One would be poor grammar and punctuation. I always felt like if you couldn't put your best foot forward, if you're asking for $1 million, that you probably shouldn't get the $1 million, even if you have a good idea. If you have like lots of mistakes, that leads to the fact that you may be reporting later with lots of mistakes. So you need to think about that. You need to pay attention to the guidelines. You have an RFP from STEMspark, I believe. Is that correct, Marilyn? They already have that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Giving you some guidelines on how you should prepare a proposal. And then you always have to remember to submit on time. I've had one situation where the proposal got locked up in the federal submission process, and when they say 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they warn you, don't wait till the last minute to submit. And if you hit that block where it's all locked up, they really do throw it out because you're late. So we'll talk about how proposals are submitted in just a few minutes, but right now, just know that that's something that you need to do. So where do you get ideas? Well, there's a lot of ways to get ideas. How many people in this room right now know what you're going to ask for already? It's 1, 2, 3. So the rest of you are open for, it's open for discussion, maybe 5. Less than a third of you already know what you want to ask for. So you can talk with other educators. That's a good way to think about what you want to ask for. You can use your data, document your need. If you have something in the next generation science standards or the Common Core math standards, or you have something in the curriculum for the state and you don't have the stuff to do it with, that's a need. And you can document the need. And that's how you would address your whole issue or your problem is you would ask for that. And we'll talk how that would, a little bit more about how that would work. So use your data. And then there's lots of other people's ideas out there. There are websites that you can go to where you can ask to see proposals that have been funded previously in almost everything. And you'll get full copies of the proposal so you can look at how they're organized. Now they may not fit your need exactly, but at least you'll see what a good, solid, funded proposal looks like. And I'll show you where to get some research literature. But you can't just have a budget or an idea with a budget tacked onto it. You need to develop your case. Now, I am making an assumption that everybody in here is going to apply for the STEMspark grant. But I'm also making an assumption that you may want to apply somewhere else too. And so I'm going to probably give you more information than you need, but I think I'll give you enough information to do either way. The STEMspark only, or if you get excited about this and you really like to do it, then you can just continue to apply for funds for yourself. And you can apply for funds for yourself too, by the way, for professional development, for professional travel, for going to meetings, for stuff in your classroom, for stuff for yourself. So don't limit yourself. So you have to ask yourself, and I know that this is on the scoring rubric, you know, what is the goal of the project? If you read the proposal, what's the bottom line? What is it, when it's all said and done, you're funded, you're in the midst of what you're doing, what exactly is it that you want to accomplish? That needs to be loud and clear. And if you have space, and if it's a larger narrative, you might want to repeat that a couple of times so that people know that you know what the goal is. What are the needs for the project, and what kinds of things do you need to back up this need? Let's make it a hypothetical here. You're supposed to do collecting data with probes, let's say, and you have a class of 25, but you only have 2 probes, and maybe you don't have the technology equipment that you need to go with those. That's a need. If you're expected to teach it, you don't have the equipment, or you have limited amount of equipment, you can buy more to do that. If you don't know how to use that equipment, you can actually sometimes get money to go get the training to do that equipment, to use that equipment. So there's some good things about that. And then what are your objectives? What are you going to measure? You need to be able to measure not only that you would be able to do whatever it is because of the equipment or the training, but how are you going to benchmark that? So you think about what kinds of outcomes would be produced. So for example, if a child were to have an extra 3 hours a semester available because of having additional equipment to do some science activity, that's a measurable objective. You can also then benchmark it to your formative assessments. You can benchmark it to your student achievement at the end of the year, but that's kind of waiting a long time. So you might want to have something more immediate in mind when you think about benchmarking what you're doing. And then what kind of activities are you going to do? So if you get these boxes of materials, if that's what you're going for, how are you going to use them? What kind of activities are going to be done? What kind of curriculum things are going to be done? If it's about professional development for you, if you go somewhere and you get something, training, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to deliver it? How many kids are going to be able to have access to your new knowledge? What kinds of things are you going to do differently? What pieces of curriculum are you going to be able to address that you couldn't address otherwise? These are all outcomes. And so you need to think sort of broadly about outcomes, and do not wait until TCAP or EOCs or those kinds of things come along to benchmark. You can collect other things across the cycle. And then what population will the project serve? If you have a special population, if you have, for example, inclusion students in your classroom, and they have special needs for science or math or whatever, technology, how's it going to help the students that have special needs? And if you have students that have poor reading or something else that needs to be addressed, how is it that you can use what you received to help those students to make gains, improve teaching and learning for them? So it's always back to how are you going to use the money, how are you going to measure the outcomes, and how are you going to really document this. And then what's the expected result? How will it meet the need or solve the problem identified? So if you pick too big a problem, you're not going to be able to meet your goals. So you need to think realistically about this process as you're developing your proposal. The budget, take your time to go to a website and look up what everything costs and put real dollars in there. Don't forget to put shipping. You shouldn't have to pay tax and that kind of stuff, but make sure your numbers are good. So because a realistic budget is really important. I looked at some proposals the other day for a group. I can't remember leading the group now, but there were inflated costs. In that, people that read grants on a fairly frequent basis will see that. So make sure that you can justify whatever it is you put in. Now, I have done all-day workshops with teachers, actually in this building. When we had the Mass Science Partnership with, I think it was Union County. Oh, you were there? Okay, Gail was there. You submitted the proposal that day, and you got it, right? Yeah, she submitted the proposal before the day was over, actually, and I don't remember what you got, Gail.
Well, the was,
you got science.
Dollar General stores have those small amount, mini grants like $1,000.
Yes.
I don't remember what it was for, because since then I've read quite a few.
Okay, but it was finished in less than a day.
Yes.
And she got grant, and then there was someone from Union County that was there, and they pooled their resources, and they got over $1,000 worth of science materials from the AAIA. I'm going to show you that one. It's real easy to submit. So they looked up what everything costs, made their case, had their data, submitted the proposal, and got the grant. It's not impossible. It's doable. Even the Model T group, it is not impossible. It is not. It's easy. It's just a matter of sort of playing by the rules and making sure you have your pieces put together. Now, this is always a sticky point. Your school provides a place for you to do stuff, teach. And so if you have to give in-kind or cost share, that's what that last one is. What kind of resources can the school provide that would leverage the money you're asking for? For example, I gave the example of having 2 sets of probes and 2 computers, and that was insufficient. Well, 1 would be insufficient also. But if you can make the case that if you had 1 more of whatever, then you would have 3, and you could increase student time on whatever this is. That's called in-kind or cost share. That's sometimes very important for grants. The use of this room, if I had to rent this room at like a hotel or something to do a workshop, it would cost me, and I'm not kidding, let's say they only rent them in half days, $200, $300 just to use the facilities. So, you know, there are cost shares that's not like real money, handing out real money. And then there's real money. I'm going to show you one way that I think you should try to leverage your STEMspark grant against the AAIA grant and get you an additional $250. But these are important pieces for grants.
Ms. Carey, I have a question.
Yes.
When you're, because I was trying to write this one for plants.
For plants.
Like a greenhouse.
Uh-huh.
And it asked for a budget for the project, but it did not say what kind of format to put it in. So is there a format that they're looking for? I mean, do you need an Excel?
We're gonna talk about format. Yes.
Okay.
That's I have a section in here that if they don't give you a format, use this one. But oftentimes they do. And if I don't answer your question, I will tell you and give you something. If you'll give me your email, I'll send you an example of a format for a grant proposal budget. They're very easy. It's usually personnel, materials and supplies, you know, travel, indirect if you have any, which I doubt you would have that, but like participant costs and that sort of thing. So, yes, good question. And if you have questions, please ask. And then they want a narrative that goes with it, and we'll talk about the budget narrative. So they also want to know when you're going to do this. So now you need to back up and think about, if I get the STEMspark grant, when am I going to start doing things? What's a realistic timeline for implementation? And so you would actually lay that out by the month, actually. So let's suppose you got funding October 1st, and then you had to order whatever it is you're going to use. And so you would begin to do your planning and your scheduling maybe for November. Then you would do your implementation in December. Then you would start collecting data. And you need to put your report into that as well. Like, how do you report out, and, you know, what the format is for reporting out. It all goes on a timeline that's realistic. Then you need to think about who's responsible for this. Well, guess what? You are. If you submit, you're responsible. And we'll talk a little bit about responsibility and accountability, but you need to know if the person's qualified to do this. Now this is more on bigger grants, because I'm sure that you're all qualified to do what you're going to write. I was qualified for that $50 one, and I'd never written a grant in my life, because I knew what to do with microscope slides and I knew how to teach biology. So who's going to be responsible? Who's going to direct the work when the rubber meets the road and when the report is due, or when the bill needs to be paid or signed off on? You know, you need to report on what you did with the students. It's you. And so you need to think about that. And then how is your project unique or different from others? In a big competition, like a really big competition, they're looking for innovation oftentimes, and you have to think about standing out from the crowd. Standing out from the crowd gets you more points because sometimes they'll read your grant a little differently. I had a friend who wrote a grant. It was a really good grant. It was about forensic science. And she submitted it and did not get funded. And she was very upset, and I thought she should have been upset because it was a really good grant. So all she did was add a paragraph to the very beginning of the grant, and she framed it within the forensic science, now I'm going to tell my age, of the O.J. Simpson trial. And it was like a what if, and it put the whole grant into context because it was all about forensic science. And she got the grant. She got like $30,000, $40,000 to do this, but it was adding a paragraph. Yeah, those are bigger grants, and those are unique circumstances, but that's what it is too. It's unique. It gets people thinking like you want them to think.
Terry,
Yes.
so many times it asks, and I think the STEMspark does, it asks the number of students that are going to be impacted.
Mhm.
Is it better to do small group or like one big activity, like an ongoing versus something for the entire school, or does it matter?
I have mixed feelings on that. I don't think that, I think a good grant would impact students beyond 1 year. And so I would probably, if I had a limited amount of funds, I would try to probably write something that would address whatever size group you want, and then put in place some sustainability piece either through the curriculum or through whatever it is you purchased that you can do this again. So sometimes numbers matter. In like the federal grants, they want to know how many students are going to be served because there's a lot of bean counting that goes on at the federal level. Like, okay, you know, more is better, not necessarily, but I could go either way on that one. Sorry, I didn't give you an answer.
No, you sort of did.
And here, yes.
In the example that you gave, where she resubmitted the grant.
Yes.
So, are you gonna address that, resubmissions of rejected grants, or is now?
I can.
Okay.
Just make me do it. Just ask me about it because, yeah, that's really important. If you get comments back, pay attention to the comments. The problem is, and not so much for this particular RFP, I understand, but I've gotten grants back that weren't funded, and then I've done pre-apps for grants, and I got really high scores, but they were going to like the National Science Foundation or U.S. Department of Education. The problem is the people that read the grant the second time aren't the same people.
Mm.
So if you get back substantive comments about your grant that you didn't explain something well enough, then yes, absolutely.
And do you
Clear
need
it
to-
up and resubmit.
Do you need to wait for like an invitation to resubmit?
Yes.
Or?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not just
Yes.
if you get rejected, rewrite it and try again?
No,
Okay.
no, you've got, because they close that gate at a
Right.
certain time and that's it. And then
Right.
usually it's 6 months to a year before they open it up again.
Okay, and so then you can resubmit?
Right,
Okay.
right. Or submit somewhere else. That's always a possibility. But no matter what happens with all this other stuff, if you submit it to the wrong place, they don't have your interest, you're dead in the water. So that's very important. So, I'm going to show you a grant. This is one that's active and you can apply for. And so, those of you that have laptops, you can click on this. I think this is a perfect STEM grant. So let's see what you can get for this. It's called a Sea Perch grant. And it's about underwater robotics. That sounds pretty good, right? So this is open. So if I click on the Sea Perch, and I wait. Okay. This is the RFP. A lot of these are submitted online. All right, so Sea Perch has an audience. Well, I was hoping you could go through this with me, so let me just show you what you can find. When you go to the RFP, especially for something like this, what you need to do is look at these tabs. Okay, I didn't know much about sea perch when I was preparing this, so I thought, well, I need to know a little bit more about what that is. So there you go. You go to about, and it talks about sea perch, why sea perch, and then I'm thinking, okay, these folks that are coming tonight are probably all middle school and high school. I don't know that for sure, but I don't want to bring up something that is not relevant to you. I found out this is like K-12, so it can go up or down in grade level. I'm thinking, okay, this is a good one. Talks about the sponsors, talks about the story, talks about documents, testimonials, and there's something called regional points of contact. And so I thought, I wonder if anybody's in Tennessee. Because if you see a national grant where there's not a presence in your region, that means that there is not geographic equity. Therefore, you might be the Tennessee person that gets to apply for this, and then there's going to be a regional contact for sea perch in Tennessee. And that is a good thing. So I thought, all right, and there isn't. So I looked at the regional points of contact, and I looked for Tennessee. For Region 5, guess what? Nobody. Okay? So there's nothing to look for there. So then you look at the different parts of the sea perch. You have to set up an account, and then you can get in and you can look at the events. They have an events calendar. This is slow. And it looks at all the things that are going on about sea perch. Well, sea perch is one of those things where if you don't know how to do this, there's training so that you can do this. And you could, if you had funds, such as STEMspark funds, you might travel to one of those trainings. And if you didn't want to travel, you might do the webinar trainings. They will actually train you online so where you can do this particular grant. Now, what do they want you to do with this grant? You can buy kits for students to participate in this, and all you have to have is a place for them to do their underwater robotic thing, like a swimming pool or a lake or something, and this would be really kind of cool. I don't think it'd be that hard to get this particular grant. I think it's about $1,500 because I think the kits are about $155 each, and they'll let you apply for kits, 10 kits. So you've got the link to that, okay? But if you go to the website, it'll give you resources, teacher tools, student library. They have a browse by topic. They have presentations. They talk about grant and scholarship opportunities, and then they help you get started. They answer your questions. You can look at the online training. You can look at regional points of contact. You can look at the community. So they help you a lot. I didn't know anything about this one. So this is one that's potentially a good thing, all right? And potentially all grades. Now, if you have no reason to have this in your curriculum, that's one thing, so you wouldn't need to worry with it. But if you had something about robotics in your curriculum, which could be engineering, then it might be a good thing for you to look at, okay? So we found what we found, that there's resources, there's information, there's guidelines. I suspect their RFP comes up after you create an account, and I didn't, okay? Here's another one. So let's look at this one. This is the DuPont Challenge Science Essay Competition, and this is for your students, okay? Although the teacher wins as well. So you can have an essay where a student in either grade 7 through 12 writes a 700 to 1,000 word science essay under any of those 4 categories. And if they do, they can win up to $5,000 and the teacher and a trip to Walt Disney World and to the Kennedy Space Center, so it's a nice prize. And then the trips, the teachers can also win $500 grants. So if you want to click on that, there's the DuPont. There's the DuPont site, and you can look at all of the different pieces of this about preparing. Oh, tells you how to prepare a winning essay. research and writing tips. It looks at choosing your challenge. It probably has research there for students. Has things there for teachers. Has rules. Has past winners, so you probably can read what past winners have written. Gives you your entry form, tells you about the company, and tells you about who's sponsoring, which is NASA, NSTA, Walt Disney World, and so on. So this would be a good way to get your students involved in writing about science, which I believe informational text and writing about science is in the next generation science standards, and certainly very important for STEM. So there are literally thousands of these sites, just like this. Not DuPont, but similar sites. So you've got a really good, I don't know what we did without the internet, truly. Questions so far? No? All right, we know what we found. So you can also look up research literature or information or experiences of other people who've written grants. Like I've told you that if you go on a website, if you want to just do a Google search on funded proposals in something, you can find them. They may be just the abstracts. Sometimes it's the full proposal with the budget. Just depends on where you look. And then reference your own experiences. So here's the checklist. Somebody said if you don't have like the budget. Okay, and we're going to go through some things, and then you're going to get to do some work together. You need to decide who's going to do this. What do you need? What do you actually have the capability to do? How do you go about the planning? How do you go from give me the money to here's my goals, and plan and reasoning? How do you collect data on your proposal? For reporting, how do you write? How things to avoid, like jargon, like the acronyms that we all have, educator speak. You need to avoid the jargon about your timeline and your budget. Who's going to do it? How's it going to be done? So if the STEMspark, who in here teaches at the STEM Hub? Okay. All right. So if you had this gets you extra points. If you got a STEM Hub Spark grant, whatever this one is called, mini grant, if you said you're going to do this and you're going to share it with somebody else, that's what's called outreach, and that usually gets you more points because it goes beyond just doing this for yourself. You're going to share this with other people, and maybe you're going to share it by going to TSTA and doing a presentation. You're going to do something there, or you're going to go to a math conference, or you're going to do something with teachers in your own school or a neighboring school. So that's the outreach. You have to think about your outcomes. You have to think about how you're going to monitor and evaluate what you're doing, how you continue things. That's the sustainability piece. Like Race to the Top is going to be over next year. Okay, there have been a lot of things put in place. I'm sure there's a lot of conversations going on right now about how you're going to sustain all these wonderful things that have been put in place. You need to think about sustaining too. Think about if you get materials, how you're going to get the consumables refurbished if you get some science equipment. Think about who's going to review your proposal. And we'll talk more about that. Who wants you to do this? If you have endorsements, and I doubt, do they have to have endorsements or letters of, okay. Yeah. Okay. In some proposals, you have to write, when you write your proposal, you have to ask someone to say, we support Ms. Jones because we know, I mean, I'm making this up, and it's not very good. Because we know that there's limited equipment in the biology lab to study X, and we think that this would be a really good use, whatever. So you get a letter of recommendation or commitment. And then the mechanics. Make sure the spelling's right. Make sure that you can do this and then meet the deadline. Okay. So let's look at your STEM RFP that you have a paper copy of. they have a,
They do not have a paper copy of it, but we can put it up,
Okay.
on the internet and
Okay.
see what it looks like. Do you want to-
and they do have this too, right?
They do not have that, that's on the internet. They, I mean, it's,
But they can see it.
They can see it,
Okay.
but we can put that up.
Okay.
Yep.
We can either do it this way or we can do it with a document.
Either way.
You want the proposal first, right? Let's
Yes.
go to the website so they can see where to find it. So what you want to do is go to STEMspark.com, which is our website, and that's where Lee's going to go right now. And when you get there, we try to keep the most current news on the news carousel with the pictures right up front. So right down here it says mini grant announcement. And if that picture is not up, then you can click the left arrow or the right arrow to bring you back. There's 3 stories going on right now. So you want to be on the mini grant story. Whoops. And when you're on the mini grant story, then just click read more. And that will take you to the mini grant announcement, and it describes it here. And to fill out a grant form, you click on this link, and it will take you to the form. So this is the basic form where we just get your contact information. And down here at the bottom is some information like Dr. Lashley has been talking about, the grade level of the students impacted, how many students are going to be impacted, will students be impacted in subsequent years, the time frame, as it scrolls down a little further, I think, yep. And then the total amount of funds that you're requesting. Now if you go back, Dr. Lashley, to the STEMspark page.
Okay.
Was that news here? Was that what that tab? Yeah, okay. This paragraph describes what needs to be in your proposal. So this is basically the RFP. And if you want to know how your proposal is going to be scored by the grant readers, you can look at the evaluation rubric.
And we will look at that in a minute.
They notes.
Okay,
great.
All right, so if you can read this, I don't know if people in the back can see the print, but it says, register your project, and that's what you just saw a moment ago. And then you want to write a project summary of no more than 2 pages, and then you email it, okay? The summary should include a paragraph summary of your proposal. In other words, what you're going to do. So it's going to be your goal, and it's going to be your objectives, exactly what you're going to do. And then, why is this STEM related, and how does it meet the specific needs of your students? So again, now here comes your data. If you have a special population of students, this is where you would want to address that. If you have like super bright students that need materials that are, you know, something that you don't have, this is where you would put that. How will you evaluate the success of your project? So that means you need to know where you started. So you'll have to have some baseline data that you collect. And that baseline data could be as simple as we don't have enough equipment in some particular component, and this would increase the student time with some piece of science equipment that you are going to purchase. Or it could be very sophisticated. You could look at you know, trends of EOC scores over, you know, over time, 3 years or more of data, where you're scoring low in some component and you want to improve that, and you can trace that back to the need because you don't have the materials to teach it the way you want to teach it. That's a need. Or you can look at TCAP scores that show some area that's low, and there's something that you can get to where you can improve that. That's a need. So you need to think really about your needs. It's something that you want to have because you need it. And then how do you plan to use your professional development in attaining?
So they could either apply for a project or equipment, Dr. Lashley, or apply to go to a contract for professional development.
That sounds good.
Kind of an either or thing there.
So, are there people in here that are math teachers? Like the NCTM at Louisville, November 6th? I think it starts November 6th, or TSTA,
November
Nashville.
7th.
I'm sorry?
Which is November 7th.
November, oh really?
7th through the 9th.
So you have to pick. Okay. So you can do that. And then you would have a budget detailing your expenses. What does it cost? Think about your registration. Think about, your travel. Think about membership, perhaps, and other resources or services that will be used, such as a matching them for volunteers. If you have volunteer speakers come in and they do an activity, and then you want to do that activity with students later, if they bring in some special equipment, then that would be a way that you could say the volunteer, you collect the quality and their time, their quality of services and their time, and they can give you something that would be a cost share. Again, that sometimes gives you extra points. And you really have a short deadline, September 24th at 11:59 p.m., and I think she must mean it. And guess what? Computers will be right on time, and so you're going to have to meet that. So looks to be doable. All right, so then after you submit your proposal, there is a scoring rubric, and it's online. And I made some.
Just hit cancel, I guess.
Cancel?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not gonna let me zoom it. Okay, well anyway. So the scoring rubric, there's 30 points for evaluating the project, which includes impact on current students, future student impacts, and project time frame relative to total project budget. That's 30 points. You can't mess up there. So what you're really looking to talk about is how are you going to do something with what you get this year? How are you going to use what you get this year with future students? That's the sustainability piece that everybody's interested in. And then the project time frame related to the total project budget, which is really about doable, I think. So it's realistic and the timeline is reasonable. The second one is 10 points, and is it clearly stated, your goals clearly stated, and is it STEM related? Okay. And then in this particular one, exactly what, when everything is done, you've spent the money, what is it that you accomplished? And what was your target? The third one, 20 points, is about your student needs or your impact outcomes. And again, this is 20 points, so you would have to have a baseline of where you started, and then how did you determine that you made the gains? So what kind of data are you going to use, and how will you present it in your report or to whoever? Do they do a final report? Okay, in your report. So you might be thinking about charts and graphs, photos, anecdotal information from students. That's always good. That's the student voice about what this did for them. But they may also want numbers. So be thinking about collecting those beginning numbers and then the numbers at the end. And then how are you going to evaluate yourself? So what was your baseline and how did you evaluate yourself? And there's multiple ways to do this. Is the budget, is a comprehensive budget there with real prices, not inflated prices? And then what other resources did you use to leverage your $1,000 grant? You might get somebody that would give you contributions of stuff, or you might give someone that will give you time. And those are all in-kind or cost share, and so that just says that you've thought this through and you're not just depending on the $1,000 and when it's gone, okay, well, that was good, but it's gone, that you've really thought this through. Questions about the RFP that we just looked at, or this evaluation rubric. I'm assuming they're going to be blind scored. They are. So they're not going to know who's written this. And I guess I'll ask this question. You can tell me. I'm not going to tell you. Are the science or STEM people going to read these, or who's going to read these?
We are recruiting faculty from teacher education colleges at the 3 community colleges and University of Tennessee. So
Okay.
folks that understand education and have been in a classroom and will hopefully speak your language.
Okay, so that's good. But that would still don't use a lot of jargon, because they may know higher ed jargon, but they may not know EOC, they probably do. But they might not know some of the acronyms that we use in K-12, so you try to stay away from those. Are they restricted on the 2 pages to absolutely 2 pages,
2 pages.
single spaced?
We didn't specify, so if you wanna cram it all in an 8-point type single space, then go for it.
Okay, usually there is a 12 or 10 font, plus you have to use certain fonts like Times New Roman or Arial, but not Arial narrow. So just so you know, you're getting a gift there. Sometimes shorter is better. Bullets are good. Wow, 8-point font. Ooh. Okay, I'd have to have them.
I'm not saying please do that, but we tried to keep it very easy.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint. Is the rubric online? Yes,
Mhm.
it is. Do you want me to show you where that is? I think I can get back there.
Just hit off the X up at the top.
Under news, right here. Under the STEMspark, there's an evaluation rubric, and then there's the grant sign up. Yes.
When you're dealing with, you know, $1,000 grant and it's like for a specific project, you know, in my experience, you're buying kind of consumable sort of things. Do you think sustainability is really an issue in that sort of a situation? And I can, you know, I mean, sort of even like the example you gave us with the C thing, you know, those kits, you know, when you're writing a grant for something like that, I mean, obviously that's kind of a beginning and an end. So
Right.
do you think sustainability is that big of an issue? Do you still need to address it in a grant like this, or do you need to kind of just say?
Well, okay, so if I had a budget for my classroom, and usually when I taught, I did have a little budget. If there are consumable items, like things that can be refurbished, you could say that you will ask for refurbishment costs in your budget that you get for your classroom.
Well, I guess I meant more like if you've got a kit and you're building something, and once it's built, it's built.
Right. Usually they're made so you take them apart too, but yes, that is a good question. I don't know more about the sea perch. I mean, I did not open up to see what the materials were.
Mhm.
Usually they have refurbishment kits, so there's some pieces of them that are reusable. That at least that's what I found in the science kits that I've looked at with FOSS and STC and those sorts of things.
Mhm.
There are some things that have to be refurbished, but
Mhm.
usually they're like paper cups and string and tape and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So one way, if it's that kind of a kit, yes, for consumables. But if it's like really, once you build it, that's it, it's done, and you never get to use it again, that would be an issue. I don't think that's what these are, but I could be wrong.
But the little robots would be collecting data another year too. So,
Yeah.
not maybe the building process, but you could add in that you would be collecting data with them for the entire 2 or 3 year program or whatever, however you plan to do that.
Right. Plus just the general knowledge that you would have to be able to recruit in some way is gonna be pretty significant. And so, that's a very good question, and I don't have a really good answer for it. I know
Well,
that.
and I mean, what you're saying though is, you know, I guess what I'm asking is, you know, do you need to include a piece that says, you know, I'm gonna try to find more funds for this next year to do this, but I mean, obviously, if you learn something and that's reusable, that's,
Right.
I guess, sort of a different element than what I'm asking.
Right, and I understand what you're asking.
Okay.
On most of the things that I've seen, like when you buy a BSCS or a FOSS kit, and they come in the tubs, most of the stuff that you use is easily obtained at Walmart. There are pieces of it that you use over and over, like test tubes and that kind of stuff, but of course those break too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very good question, and I don't have a good answer. But that's good to think about. And then I know some teachers that have used FOSS and STC kits. They will send a list out at the beginning of the year to parents and say, if you'd like to contribute to the classroom, we could really use, you know, 500 Dixie cups or a big ball of twine or, you know, things that you would have to go purchase yourself at Walmart. And that's a good way to keep your classroom up. Thank you for asking that question, though. Okay, so everybody knows how to get here. Yes, okay. Let's see.
Oh,
That's okay. I can, yeah, I can do that. All right, so now to the nitty-gritty of how you write the proposal. You're it, if you're going to be the one that's gonna submit this. And you need to make sure that what you're asking for isn't available already in your school. And the one thing that most people really have problems with is trying to make a round, well, I guess it would be a square block go into a round hole. And that is that if you try to take something you want and put it in the wrong place, don't chase dollars for the sake of dollars, because you'll end up wasting your time because it's not going to be compatible. Be certain it's something that you can do, that the safety issues for science are understood, and to get buy-in from other people on the front end. That is really important. And what that means is that if you say that you're going to partner with the math teacher to do whatever, make sure that the math teacher is really going to partner with you, because if you get the money and then you've got a project that you have to have a math teacher to work with you and you haven't talked to them, that's not a good thing. Planning. Involve other people. Have conversations with other people about what you're going to do. And ask teachers to sign on, and I mean this quite literally, to what you're planning to do with your grant funds if you're funded. Which means that if you say you're going to share with other 5th grade teachers, get them to sign that they're going to watch you do this and they're going to do this in their classroom, whatever this is. Because that says that you're really thinking ahead and you're wanting to do something that's going to have an impact, not just for your classroom, but for other classrooms. We regularly in Southeast Ed issue RFPs for grants, and one of the stronger grant pieces that we look at is how many teachers in the school, because we give grants for post-secondary education access, how many other teachers even know about this, and they sign on to, they would participate and go on field trips with students and that kind of stuff. And that's important, because that says it's not just one person getting some funds to do something really small that's not going to impact a lot of kids. So we literally ask for people to sign on the front end. And don't go out on a limb by yourself. These are all pictures we took last week. This is when my husband, bless his heart, got a special guide and wanted to follow grizzly bears in the water, so he had on chest waders, and I said, did it ever occur to you if that grizzly bear decided to turn around and come the other way? And he said, well, I thought about that later, but didn't happen. And anyway, so don't go out on a limb. Don't say you can do something and then not be able to follow through. Usually there are consequences for that in the grant process, which might include giving money back, which you don't want to do. Yes?
You mentioned earlier about when Jan asked about the number of students that you were going to impact, and you just mentioned you want to impact a large number. Okay? Can you clarify that a little more? Do you want to write this to where you're saying that, like, I'm impacting all of my 7th grade this year, or do you want it to be a smaller number to where it's going to be, the impact is going to continue year after year? How do you kind of gauge what it is that needs to be that thing? Obviously, it's not, my 5 and no more, 4 no more, whatever.
Right.
So what's a good rule of thumb to say, I want to do this for, what do you do? I mean, how do you go?
Okay. I'm assuming that you would spend all the money within a certain time frame, and I'm looking back at Ms. Roddy right now. They have a time that all of the money has to be expended.
That is not listed on the RFP, but when the funds are awarded, there will be a letter that comes with that the teacher will return and say that they understand that the funds are to be used between now and the end of the school year, and that a final report will be due at the end of the year to report back on, your evaluation, your evaluation statistics and how it made an impact.
Okay. So you need to have that critical mass for your impact, for sure. But, you know, I could see, what grade? Seventh grade. I could see we're seventh graders, and I didn't exclude anybody else. Students could get really jazzed up and doing presentations, like showcasing what they've done with your work, and I think that's impact as well. But you have a timeline to spend this, so I guess you can't pull back any money for future years, but you could certainly keep record of what you did, what it cost, and then look somewhere else for some money to do it again. So you would be then, seventh grade, how many students do you see? Like 100, 125 a day?
I see 75.
75?
Yeah, we've had a lot of changes to do that, so.
Okay. So you would want to impact, I mean, you want to show impact with those 75 students. So I'd say that you could think about you're going to spend it all on those 75 students, but then outreach and other methods.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Repeat your idea. This may not be so important in a 2-page, but in others, sometimes it's what's called mission drift or vision drift over time. You begin reading what you think they want to do, and by the end of it, you're not sure what it was they started with. So repeat or maintain your central ideas, and this would be for bigger proposals. Collect your data early. So right now, if you have this due September 24th, you need to go back to your student achievement data or whatever data that you're going to use to baseline where you started and get that in order. Getting that in order means you decide if you're going to put it in a graph, you decide if you're going to put it in a chart, you decide what kind of data it's going to be, how much of your 2 pages are you going to take up for this. Maybe you only need a paragraph with some numbers. If 8 fonts, you can probably get a lot on a page. And make sure that your information is up to date and it's accurate, because it will be someplace where somebody can check it. So check your numbers, you use numbers, and then use graphics in your chart. I can tell you that when you write bigger proposals, white space is very important, and you're not going to have a lot of white space in your proposal. There are also things that you can do when you get really fancy. You can do things called hot boxes, where you take little sections out of your narrative, and in that you will put really specific things you want people to look at. That's what professional grant writers do, and they call them hot boxes. People that write proposals that are $50, $60, $70 million, you can get lost in the narrative, so they want to make sure that you see that. And so you'll see it various places throughout the proposal, just to draw your attention to something. So you can think about how artistic you want to be with this. Yes?
You said on larger grants that white spaces are important.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. As a grant reader, and I would encourage all of you to sign up for that sometime, to read grants. It's a wonderful learning experience. It rests the reader's eyes, and it gives them a break in their thoughts to where they can organize. It's really for the reader as much as for anybody else. The white space is just, it adds a dimension of organization to a grant that just makes it really nice. And I definitely would not consider using 8 font, because it makes me tired. But, you know, every once in a while, you have to consider if you're going to indent. You know, are you going to, I mean, these are little technical things. Am I going to indent? Am I going to, like, just put an extra space in between one section? Am I going to justify my margins? Am I going to make it easy for the person to read? That's important. Easy for the person to read, because if they have a hard time figuring out what are they saying, where is it, so follow the flow. What I always do when I'm short on space, okay, if I can't like indent, because I really can't even afford that little 5 spaces because I'm over, you know, I'm right on the page limit. I usually take the first 5 words or the first word and I'll bold it, and then it's a break, and it gives you some white space, and you can have a space, and it's going to show, it's a nice sort of change of pace. These are all little things that when you're really like strapped for space and you're really into this, that you learn to do. If you get into 12 font and you can't afford and let's say you've got 5 paragraphs on a page, you're using 12 font. If you take that, the spaces in between paragraphs to like 8 font, you can gain a whole line just on one page. I've done it all. I have done it all to get the words, but I do not recommend 8 font. 10, 12, and make it easy. You know, they're not going to be literary works of art. They're not. Follow the rules, answer the questions. So on your proposal, the one for the STEMspark, project impact, guess what I would have for my first paragraph? Project impact, colon, and then I just write. The second one I would have project goal, relation to STEM. That makes it so easy for people to read, and they will bless you for it, point-wise, because they're not gonna have to scratch all over looking for what it is you're gonna do. So, just.
So you wouldn't recommend like paragraph form?
Yes, I do recommend paragraph form. I don't recommend indenting, because you don't have enough space to indent. I would just start it off with a bold, like instead of having this, where this would be over, and I could put, just to break it, you can use colon, and then, but I would make this all bold.
So on this one, you would recommend using the headings
Oh, yes.
according to what they are asking.
And then when you get somebody to review it, and that's one thing we're gonna talk about in a minute, then they're gonna, if you have stuff in there that's not related to that header, you need to take it out. Put it somewhere else, or maybe just take it out. Yes, I do. Like I said, the best proposals are the ones that are the easiest to read and that are organized well, because you know exactly, it shows that they know what they're gonna do.
Will all places have a rubric like that one, when you go online to look at a grant?
If you go to like the NSF website or US Department of Education website, they will have section headings, and sometimes they will tell you how many points are in that section, but not necessarily in each subsection. So there'll be some guidelines, but it won't be as good as this. This is really very clear. So if this one was 30 points, okay, let me read this and then I'll tell you what I'm talking about. In the evaluation piece, it says evaluate the project impact, including impact on current students, future students, and the project time frame relative to the total project budget. There's 4 sections in that 30 points. I would try to divide up my statements about each of those so that there would be equal weighting, where you could divide it up into like about 7.5 points each. Goal clearly stated, and is it STEM related? There's 2. I would make sure that I address each one, and each statement I made, I would roughly guess would be about 5 points. So if you leave out any of that, you're going to lose points. Anybody else have a question about that? This is when it gets to the fun piece, when you know what you're going to do and you're trying to figure out how to make it work and how to best present your idea. Do not use these words. Nobody wants something that hopefully is going to work or that might work. Be very positive in your writing style. Do not use jargon. You never know who's going to read it, although you now know who's going to read this one, but for anything else you submit, you don't know. Do we need to take a break? That took too long. You want to take like a 3 or 4 minute break? Because I see people getting drinks and needing to go to the restroom. Okay. How about